Welcome back to another episode of PB Ballers in collaboration with Fighting Stripes. I'm your host Albert, joined again by our PSG superfan Paul. Paul, today we're going to talk about a really important topic. We're going to talk about Korean midfield young phenom Lee Kang-in, and we're going to debate his future basically at PSG. Just for a little background information for the viewers, Lee Kang-in obviously is a staple of the Korean national team, but he hasn't played that much recent matches for PSG. He's kind of been relegated to a bench role by Luis Enrique, almost not finding a position, whether it's on the wing or in midfield. Paul, why don't you start off and just talk about kind of Kang-in's current situation and where he stands with Enrique?
Well, I mean, at the beginning of the season, his second season, he got off to a really, really hot start. So we were very hopeful, that he would improve on his second season, which I also predicted with Mbappe leaving. I thought the team would be a little bit more team focused and not just focused on one player and building the offense around one player. So it started that way. They had some early injuries with Carl Ramos and a few other guys, so he was able to step in and really contribute early on. And everything was going well. They even like experimented with him in the false nine role, so he was kind of getting placed everywhere, which was good. He was getting plenty of playing time, even in Champions League. And then the winter transfer window hit. This is where things started to go bad for him. They signed Kvara, obviously from Napoli, and he kind of overtook one of the attacking positions. They don't really have positions up front; they just have three spots, and they just put the three best guys there. And Guevara kind of just naturally fit in there, so that kind of took Kang-in's minutes from the attacking front three away. And how I see it is that I think Kang-in's kind of in a flux because he's not as dangerous as the attackers up front. So he's a serviceable winger, but not as dangerous as those guys are. They're pacier, they're more dangerous in the box, they're a little bit more aggressive, where Kang-in's more of a keep the ball, let's play safe type of guy. And then when you go to the midfield where you want to switch him over, he doesn't have the game control like Vitinha. He doesn't have the aggressiveness in duels like Neves, and he doesn't have the experience of Fabian Ruiz. So he's kind of like not good enough a little bit everywhere. So this is what has kind of been his unfortunate demise here at PSG at the moment. And on top of Guevara, you add in Desiree Doué, who's been really coming on as of late. When he first started the season, it wasn't that great. A lot of people were questioning the signing. I know he took some time choosing between PSG and Bayern Munich, obviously. So there was a little bit of delay there with his signing. But once he got in, he was a little bit of a slow starter. People were a little questionable with how he was playing, but he's really turned it on, and he kind of is the exact Kang-in role where he kind of can play up front, but he can also play in the midfield, but he's just playing a lot better. So at the current moment, that's the position that Kang-in is in.
Yeah, I think really for me what kicked it off was Doué and the Georgian kid Kvaratskhelia coming in,
Yeah,
just because Kang-in is not a traditional winger by any
yeah,
sense of the imagination. When you spray the ball out to him wide, he's not really going to take guys on. He's going to kind of cut to the inside and look to play a pass or, maybe hit a shot after he cuts in. I can't really blame Enrique for not playing him as much, even though I'd like to see him play because he's not a traditional winger. He's not fast enough. But if you want to play him in midfield, I feel like you already have Vitinha there, and I don't think Vitinha is exactly a traditional 10. But the point is that all of the kind of progression from midfield starts with Vitinha, right? And it's kind of tough to have two ball dominant players like Kang-in and Vitinha playing in the middle together. And at this point, obviously, Vitinha is higher in the pecking order for good reason because the kid is quite small and diminutive, but he really is able to control the game at an amazing pace, I think. And him playing in the center, kind of like an Andrea Pirlo or Toni Kroos, just watching him play is really, really awesome. And for Kangin, it sucks, right? Because he's also not the biggest guy either, so he's not really a number 8. So I think Fabian Ruiz is going to play on that left side besides Vitinha, and then on the right side, either you got Zaire Emery there, or the other Portuguese kid, João Neves. So there's just an abundance of riches in terms of PSG's roster. I know a lot of people thought they wouldn't be as good after losing all their superstars, but ironically, the team is looking better because it seems more balanced, not focused on Mbappe and Messi. So this is kind of why I'm leaning towards maybe Lee Kang-in has to leave PSG in the summer. Not sure necessarily where he would go right now because I think PSG still is a pretty top club, but unless one of those guys in midfield or one of those wingers picks up a serious injury and is out for a while, I can't really see him playing all that much even in the future. But do you think he should still stay even with all these guys ahead of him?
It's a fine line as far as you want to be on a top club that's competing for trophies year in and year out, as opposed to getting starter minutes and maybe not getting so many trophies. And we've already had one Korean star go through this experience with Sonny, and we've seen how, I don't want to say it took a hit on his reputation, but people are always bringing that up, that he doesn't have any hardware. Um, so it's tough, especially because I think if we make any NBA comparisons, there's a lot of guys who later in their career just go to bigger teams just to win trophies, right? Whether they're a big part of it or not. So it's a bit different from Kanye's perspective because he's like kind of entering the prime of his career. So it's like, what do you want to do here? It's I think there's points on both sides because I do think he's becoming a better footballer by playing with these world-class players. And now the playing time obviously isn't ideal, but I think learning under Enrique and playing under this system that everyone is just like talking about can only improve him as a player. It's just, will he get the minutes, right? And it partially falls on him too, to be honest, because he's had opportunities that he hasn't taken any advantage of. The team has been playing absolutely bananas as of late. Like it seems like everyone's picked up their form, but he's kind of fallen off. So if he was kind of going parallel with them, I could be like, all right, he's playing well too. Then that would kind of force Enrique's hand to play him as well. Because honestly, while Fabian Ruiz is a very consistent player, he's not gonna be amazing at the same time. And I think that's a ceiling that is lower on his end compared to Kang. I think Kang has a higher ceiling than Fabian Ruiz, but he just recently hasn't showed that. He's had some opportunities. I don't know if it's physical, mental confidence, what it is, but his movement to me hasn't been as sharp. Um, he doesn't look as confident out there. He's kind of rushing his shots even when he's had opportunities. Because he came in late last game for extra time, had a couple shots that just kind of went wayward, which was disappointing. I was hoping he would at least put those in more dangerous areas, but he kind of just basically passed it to Allison a couple times. So it's a rough patch for him for sure. But he still has a couple months here left in the season. Like you said, if somebody picks up an injury, or if he comes in and really shows out during his cameos, then who knows? But I would tend to agree with you, based on his current playing time and just how he's playing, that a move is most likely after the season.
Yeah, I would like him to stay in a perfect world, but I think that even if he shows out and someone gets injured, when that guy comes back from injury, I think Enrique will naturally shuffle him to the bench. There also maybe is a bit of like an Asian bias as well, where Asian players have to prove themselves a bit more compared to these European guys who come in with more prestige. But the issue is, even if he wants to transfer, I think that PSG paid what, 22 million euros for him. And considering that he's a young player, they're gonna want to make a profit, or at least not lose money on the transfer. And right now, given his playing time and his stats, I don't see any team in Europe that's worth going to. That's going to pay the money that that PSG is going to want to get for him. And it is a tricky situation because when he first moved there, I thought it was a great fit because Enrique knows him from his time in Spain. He values what he brings. But yeah, we also can't fault PSG for making these smart transfers and loading up on these young players. If he did transfer out of PSG and money wasn't an issue, Paul, you've brought this up before, but I could see Atletico being a potential fit, considering that Griezmann seems to be on his last legs, and Kang-in kind of would be a perfect replacement. Although I'm sure a lot of Atleti fans don't know about Kang-in much yet, so they might be a little, hesitant to accept him. But I think for fans who know how good he is, he could play that role. Maybe a move to another EPL team, whether that's a Newcastle, an Aston Villa maybe or a Brighton, somewhere right below the top level could work. I mean, I don't know, man. What are you thinking here in terms of his options?
Always been a dream of mine to see him play in the EPL because I just want to see how he stacks up in the top league. The physicality has bothered a lot of players that aren't Korean, whether it's like Anthony and people like that, who you've seen struggle there and then go elsewhere and then play good again. So I just feel like it might be a risk, but I still kind of want to see it just for the visual. It's like, oh, he's playing in the EPL. That's great. I just don't know exactly what team he'd go to. I know Arsenal was interested for a while, which Mike would be super excited about, but they have Odegaard already, who's kind of a very similar profile, not old like Griezmann is. So I don't know. Unless they move on from him, I wouldn't really want to see that because he'd be in a similar position that he'd be in at PSG playing behind Odegaard and Saka, right? So I don't think there'd be much difference there, if anything. But if we're talking about like a lower level, or not lower level, but like somewhere in the middle, whether that's a Newcastle, a Brighton, or maybe even a Man United, which would get Korean people really excited if you went there. But it's tough, I think, to go from a team that has Champions League aspirations to like playing in Europa or no European ball at all. So that's a big trade-off. So it just seems like Atletico just kind of ticks all the boxes. Their play style is a lot like Mallorca's style when he was in Spain, where he excelled. So I feel like that's a natural transition, maybe into a better version of that. So I think some Atleti fans are definitely interested because they know him from his time in Valencia and his time in Mallorca. So he's not a complete stranger to them. While I do want to see a move to the EPL just because I want to see how he stacks up, I think the best decision would be something like Atletico, where they are in the Champions League. They are in a league that he's familiar with. He speaks Spanish. He speaks the language perfectly. So it just seems like the right fit.
Yeah, I think Atleti would be a good fit, but like you said, dream would be to see him challenge himself in the EPL, just because it is the biggest league in the world. And yeah, to your point about Arsenal, I don't want him there because I think Arsenal are, I mean, I've made my thoughts clear on when I think of that club, but yeah, Odegaard is having a bad season, and we can't really defend him. But I mean, he's still a good player. He's the captain of Arsenal, so people saying that guy's gonna get shipped out. I mean, please wake up. Like, they're not gonna get rid of him based on one poor season. He's gonna be back next year. So if Kang-in goes there, he's not playing in the middle. He's not playing out wide because that's Saka's position. So it'd be nice to see him in the EPL. But again, even at Arsenal, I don't think he's gonna play much. So that's probably out. And yeah, like you said, it looks like Atleti might be the best fit. Although realistically speaking, Paul, I think he's going to stay at PSG for another year just to challenge himself. You look at his stats right now this season. I mean, they're not terrible. It kind of reflects kind of his lack of playing time recently. He's got 6 goals and 5 assists in 25 league matches. But then in the Champions League, he's got 11 appearances with no goals and no assists. So it's a bit of a kind of a up and down for sure. But it's just a tricky situation, like I said, because unless somebody picks up an injury or he really balls out, it's going to be tough. And it's just bad timing for us because obviously Son Heung-min hasn't played well this year because Tottenham have been terrible. And Kang-in is kind of the future and the guy that is going to have to be the main creative metronome for us at the World Cup. And I worry that if he doesn't get enough playing time at his club, then we're going to go into this World Cup with 2 stars that are either, aging or just not playing enough for their club teams.
I kind of see it that way too. I do see him staying. Enrique likes him a lot. He likes his profile. He likes his versatility. That's probably his biggest selling point right now to PSG is his versatility that he can kind of slot in anywhere. And for depth, that's very important. I think teams like PSG with these kind of aspirations want that like kind of almost Man City type depth where they have 2 starters at every position because you never know what's going to happen. And rotating wise, it keeps your guys fresh, it keeps your guys healthy, and PSG is reaping the benefits of that right now because there's a lot of teams out there who don't have this depth. We're looking tired, we're looking slow. I think it kind of happened to Liverpool. They went the strongest 11 against Southampton right before the game against PSG, and then I think they suffered for it. PSG in league games, with their almost insurmountable lead in Lee Kang, they can rotate their guys. They can put in younger guys. They could put in bench guys like Kang-in to start league matches, or they still have the French Cup left as well. So it's like they can keep their guys fresh. And I think the perfect example for that is someone like Dembele. who might have been like overplayed at his time in Barcelona, and he was so injury prone there. But ever since joining PSG, nothing. But I without bias on my end, I'd like Kang-in to stay and kind of play a similar role to how he's playing now for at least another year because I really want to see him win the Champions League. I think kind of having that under your belt and then moving on afterwards, it's almost like getting your military exemption, right? It's like, oh, I got that. I'm good. I could do whatever I want now, kind of thing. So you don't know when those kind of opportunities will come. There's always that talk of NFL players saying like, oh yeah, went to the Super Bowl, we lost. We'll get there again. But that chance never comes again. So it's like when the opportunity is there, when the opportunity is knocking, I think you kind of want to stay. And he seems to be enjoying his time at PSG. He gets along with the players. He gets along with management. So I don't, want to see him leave just yet because I want to see him pick up a trophy. But I think when you look at it from the PSG fans' perspective, because I'm kind of involved with that as well as far as how they rate Kang. I think he's a good, serviceable player. But as you mentioned with his stats and his lack of production in the Champions League, they feel like he's a good league player, but they don't know if his ability translates to Champions League. So I think that's the biggest question mark for him right now.
Out of all the seasons that they had, this is like the one season where they could actually do it. I think even when they had all those superstars, and if they win the Champions League and he wins it, I still think he should stay because he's got to fight for a spot. Yeah, and the PSG fans definitely they haven't seen him play for the Korean national team much. They just know about how much they paid for him, and they've seen only his appearances for the club. And that's fair. And you know what though, despite the fact that things look a little bleak now for him, we still have to remember that things change very quickly in the world of sports and football.
I mean, let's even through PSG, Dembele early on in the Champions League, people were asking him to get benched.
Yeah, and
He was skying clear chances against
yeah,
PSV and Atleti and Bayern, and then look how quickly he turned that around, and now he looks like the front runner to be the player of the year. It's kind of crazy, but he's really done that. So that can happen on a whim, like you said. People drop in form, people pick up in form. It's just that I feel like it's a little worrisome because Kanye's drought's been kind of long as far as you know uh, you know scoring a goal or even having a game where he's just like lights out. I just haven't seen it probably in a good 2 or 3 months.
and it happens though. He's still a young player, and I want people to remember that Son Heung-min's first season at Tottenham was kind of a nightmare for him. Objectively speaking, I remember reports saying that he missed Germany. There were transfer rumors linking him, I think, to Wolfsburg and one other Bundesliga team. And Pochettino talked to him and talked him off the ledge and said, "Hey, listen, we need you. Like your chance is going to come." But granted, I think this is Kang-in's second season at
It
PSG,
is.
but
I still
he
feel like it's a first season though, because like
yeah, you're right. It
having
is
Mbappe and not having Mbappe, that's like
yeah,
two
and
different worlds.
again, I think so. What my thing is that I think he should stay another year. And the next season you play out until the winter transfer window, and by next winter transfer window, if he hasn't played a lot or if he's just not playing well, that's when he has to pull the trigger and leave. I think he should give it another 6 months, basically, when next season starts. But either way, I think he's too good not to end up playing and not to ball out wherever he goes. Whether that's at PSG or another club remains to be seen. For now, I guess we'll just enjoy PSG's run in the Champions League. And hopefully, Kang-in makes some spot appearances because I still think he's very useful off the bench as well, especially in extra time when legs
He
are
needs a
tired. So,
moment.
yeah.
He needs a moment. Even if it's short time, even if it's 15 minutes, he needs something to happen. He needs to score a winning goal. He needs a winning assist. He needs something to happen where it's like cemented in people's heads, like, oh, this is Lee Kang-in. Like I feel like, especially for casual viewers and casual fans who don't watch the full 90, they just see, oh, the box score, or they see the highlights and they go, oh, who scored that goal? Who's this Lee Kang-in guy? And I think that's where the hype and the interest starts to build up. And he hasn't had that moment yet, unfortunately. Um, he had a couple opportunities again in the previous match with Liverpool, and he wasn't able to take advantage. I, even if it's a short time, if he can make something of it and really capitalize and jump on the opportunity to score or do something important for PSG in the Champions League, that could really, I think, switch the reputation he has right now as being just a maybe League On player and not good enough for Champions League, to kind of shift the mindsets of whether it's the PSG fans or maybe it's Luis Enrique, to get him more time. Because the one I think positive for him is his age, whereas Fabian Ruiz is kind of in his later 20s right now. So PSG might be thinking maybe we need to get money for him while we can, especially when he's playing well. Because people were trying to sell him after the Euros because he played so well in the Euros, and they're like, oh, his price tag is never going to be higher. Let's sell him now. And then even him, even Fabian Ruiz really struggled early on in the season. But again, he's turned it up in the last few games here. I'm one of his biggest detractors because I don't feel like he does enough. But I'm not gonna lie, last couple of games he's played great. And all these things that are happening with all these guys on PSG stepping up their level and Lee Kang-in not being able to match that is sad to see, but that's really the reason why he's not playing. And as a fan, you can't complain because they're playing so great. If they were playing horribly and Lee Kang-in wasn't getting minutes, then I'd be up in arms. But that's just not the case. So you kind of have to just accept it for what it is.
We'll leave it there. But guys, don't forget to hit like and subscribe. We'll have lots more content as the season progresses. But for now, thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.
See you guys.